It is another exciting moment for us to be together on the Pan-African television. Welcome to yet another edition of Global Insight, your discursive and insightful program where we take focus on topical issues affecting the global world at large. And today we are taking focus on BRICS Plus and the role it has in the global economy. And we take interest on this, focusing on the nations or BRICS nations and the major stakes to consider in today's rapidly evolving financial landscape. The BRICS grouping, which consists of Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, and other emerging markets, now play a significant role in reshaping the world's economy. According to latest statistics, the new BRICS, or potentially a BRICS Plus, represent 3.5 billion of the world's population, which is about 45% of the world. Their economies are worth over 28.5 trillion US dollars, corresponding to 28% of the global economy. The bloc's economic weight does not only reside, according to reports, in the trillions of dollars that their growing GDPs represent, but that a BRICS country produce about 44% of the world's crude oil. This is according to recent statistics pertaining the bloc. Of course, the role of BRICS Plus in reshaping the global economy can be very significant, especially on aspects like expanded market opportunities, financial cooperation, multilateralism, and global governance, among others. Those thoughts, with these new changes, it is obvious to discuss the role of BRICS in rewriting the world's economic trajectory and present financial system. And of course, we are asking the question, what are the major stakes as far as BRICS Plus is concerned, and what major role can these bloc play to ensure that the dynamics in the global economic takes take a different turn. We are looking at how the present economic system has actually brought so much discrepancies, especially between the developed countries and the developing nations. So what change can the BRICS Plus bloc bring to the global economic changes in present day society? I want to thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for trusting the Pan-African television. Of course, it is a global insight, and we talk BRICS, the role BRICS Plus nations, other nations can play in present day society to redefine perspectives, especially in the line of the global economy. With us this day to give more insight on this very topical issue that is of utmost importance. We have STEPHAN OSSENKOPP, who is a researcher with the SCHILLER Institute and is joining us from Turkey. Hello to you, STEPHAN, and welcome to the Pan-African television for you media.
Thank you for having me. It's a great honor.
And it's always a pleasure. Thank you for your time to brainstorm on this very important topic in the global world at large. And we move to the United States of America, being joined by Steve GILL, a political commentator. Hello to you, Steve. You're joining from Nashville in the United States of America. You're most welcome.
Thank you, Clarice. Good to be back with you. And Stefan, I was just in Istanbul last week and had a fabulous about 24 hours on the ground there, and look forward to getting back to Turkey.
Quite amazing, you know. In a globalized world, we get to have new experiences and, of course, to make new opinions regarding developments across the global world. And that is why today we are talking BRICS, looking at the role this bloc can play in reshaping the global economy. If YULIA is already there, we want to welcome her to the program, and she's joining us from Moscow. Hello to you, Yulia Berg. You're a political scientist and also founder of GLOBUS Expert Club. It's a pleasure having you this day on the program Global Insights.
Thank you for the invitation. Happy to join today's discussion.
And it is very imperative that we continue to discuss, because the goal is to see that the discrepancies that actually lie between developed nations and developing countries should actually be reduced in terms of development. And we are looking at the BRICS being that entity that can redefine or reshape this perspective across the global level. So, Yulia, let me kick off with you. Generally, looking at our topic for discussion, it is imperative to understand, of course, the major stakes at play when we talk BRICS Plus, and in line with the current global economy, especially in line with the financial system.
Yes, well, the economic agenda has always been, you know, at the very top of the discussions, especially when we want to talk about various scenarios for the post-transformation world. And we're seeing now that the BRICS countries are actively growing, and the key difference between the economies of the BRICS countries and the economies of, let's say, the G20 countries or G7 countries is that the growth is ensured by active development of infrastructure, of industry, and actively growing population. Sure. So those are the physical resources, let's say, that are easy to measure, easy to define and estimate in terms of their actual value. And that means that the future probably belongs to them, because the what we can call briefly the speculative economy based on egregor value or, you know, brand value that is not always based on, let's say, the real physical value, sooner or later would probably be either reshaping or collapsing. And so some of the reforms suggested that we see actively being promoted, such as introduction of digital currencies, and I do not mean the blockchain-based cryptocurrencies, but I just mean the you know, the digitalization basically of financial transactions that is actively taking place. I assume it just creates additional space for manipulations with, you know, those numbers. So when we talk about the global economy, I think it's essential to mention that, you know, the recent developments, such as the pandemic, such as economic crisis in various, you know, countries, basically led to a situation when the country level debt has been growing rapidly, and we see that the global debt is also growing in unprecedented at unprecedented pace. So that's very important to look at right now, because the current global debt is already estimated trillions of US dollars, and the global GDP is just dragging behind. So I think that is the key point to look at, because it's quite clear that the current economic model would not be able to last for a long period of time, even with all the given attempts to kind of restart it using either reforms or events of global magnitude, such as pandemic and the current global military confrontation.
And making it very problematic. And in the same perspective, Stephan, with you, when we look at the changes like Yulia just underlined, and now changes that were largely brought about by the crisis, the global crisis, the pandemic, and other aspects which have changed narratives across the globe. Some pundits of the viewpoint that in spite spite of these successes recorded by the BRICS plus group, it becomes it's still problematic because they argue that BRICS is not a former alliance like maybe NATO and other financial institutions like the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank, and they are saying this is already a limitation for the BRICS bloc, especially in spite of the successes. So in your own perspective, what do you think are those major stakes to consider as far as BRICS is concerned, and of course the changes in the global economy?
Well, if the, is that me or Steve?
It's to you, Stephan.
Me, okay. Well, if the BRICS weren't so attractive as these pundits you mentioned are saying, why have they grown to 10, and why are there 30 to 40 additional countries that want to join? And I don't know in what way or formation they will join. It will probably happen sometime in October during the Kazan BRICS summit. But the attractiveness of the BRICS does not lay in being in opposition to the West or building the same model West. It does not want to replicate the same failure of the Bretton Woods system, especially after 1971, when the dollar was completely deregulated or taken off the gold reserve standard, and when the banking deregulation started in the 1980s and 1990s and 2000s. That actually unleashed, much longer before the pandemic, unleashed the crisis of the system, that because the system consisted more and more of assets that are not tied to any, as Yulia rightfully said, not physical assets. They were merely monetary assets that were circulating in the monetary system. And I think that is exactly what is the fundamental flaw of the Western system, is they have forgotten how financial assets have to be tied to some kind of physical values and physical worth. It may be productive labor, it could be technological inventions, could be raw materials, could be infrastructure, etc., etc. But if you look at the West and the pace that infrastructure is actually decaying right now, I think you can see that there's a fundamental gap between the claimed wealth of the West and the actual physical wealth that is declining. And although I'm speaking from based in Berlin, Germany, and the sanctions, for example, that the West has imposed on Russia since already almost 10 years have led to a demise of the physical economy of Germany. Prices are too high for the small and medium-sized companies to physically exist.
Sure.
The infrastructure is now, even in my capital city, Berlin, where I live, 70% of all physical bridges are in bad or very bad distinction between monetary assets, which are basically just figures in the books, and physical assets. And so I think why there's attractiveness towards the BRICS is because they want to base their economic collaboration on physical assets. Of course, they are not all developed yet. I think only 35% of all Russian raw materials are so far basically discovered or made available.
Sure.
But that's actually what attracts them even more, because this is something that is going to a direction of the next 10, 20, 30 or 50 years for development. And I think the West is advised to cooperate with their system, because to see this as a threat or a danger to Western hegemony is exactly the wrong knee-jerk response to it.
And of course, talking about Western hegemony, and we actually mentioned in our preamble the discrepancies that this system has actually brought between the rich and the poor, where the rich are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer. And of course, this is where we bring in new impetus with the BRICS Plus bloc to see how narratives can be changed across the economic lines to ensure that countries actually witness this growth there. Of course, from their GDPs, we can ensure that there is the even distribution of wealth across the global world. Coming to you, Steve Gill, we are still leveraging on the BRICS and its potentiality or the potentials that the bloc plus need. You know, it's a bloc that recently we've seen countries all over wanting to belong. It actually shows that there is something positive that one can benefit from the bloc. So now the question is, with the stakes that Yulia and Stephan have underlined so far, we want to now understand how these BRICS countries can leverage this collective economic power to drive some sort of sustainable growth and development at a global level.
Well, first of all, I would agree with Stephan 100% that we're seeing the decline of the infrastructure. Pardon me, can you hear me?
You're muted, please. Hi, Steve. Okay, you're good now.
We can hear him.
Sure.
Yeah.
You can write on with your opinion or analysis regarding the question.
Steve had already started. You were talking to Steve Gill, right?
Of course, Steve Gill.
Yeah, he was already on, but then he was cut off.
Actually, he was muted, and that's why there was the interruption.
I heard him. I heard him.
Yeah. Okay, Steve, you can write on, please. I think we'll get back shortly to Steve while directing the same question to Yulia Berger. How can BRICS countries capitalize or leverage on their collective economic power to drive sustainable growth and development at a global level?
Well, the key difference between the approaches being used by the BRICS countries and the current economic model or the model of international interactions.
Yeah.
Sorry about this. The key difference is that the BRICS countries tend to ensure access to making the let's say economic decisions and decisions in terms of trade and development. So it's a very different basis of interactions, right? So within the BRICS, there is no bureaucracy, as you just highlighted, meaning that it's not institutionalized. And BRICS is more or less a contact group of the heads of states and relevant ministers, relevant officials, which just ensures that there is a model of interaction when the general framework is laid out by the heads of states, and at the same time you have various kinds of NGOs, various kinds of officials, including ministries and including business organizations interacting as representatives of those sovereign countries, and then they make their own decisions. And there was a recent comment on this highlighting the fact that there is no plan to introduce some kind of an institution to it. And then that's one of the key differences because it ensures an approach implying equal access to the market, and it implies that the partners can form either bilateral or multilateral joint projects or contact groups or working groups, and that means that this mechanism would allow them not to be, let's say, dominated by one force, but to be guided by common values and mutually beneficial projects in the first place. So for the countries cooperating within the BRICS framework, but not entering the BRICS or BRICS Plus, as it looks like right now, format, it means that they can have access to various kinds of offers.
Okay, very important. In the same, you want to comment to that, Stephan, still on these collective measures that this economic power can use to drive sustainable and development at a global stage. Stephan? If everything is okay with Steve, I think we'll go with him.
Is he there? Is Steve there?
Okay, let's just ride on with you. We can't get his feedback.
Oh, sorry about that.
Yeah.
Well, I believe that the BRICS are now the forefront of the voice of the global South. They're fulfilling what hasn't been, what the so-called developing countries hadn't been able to fulfill. They all the time since 1960s and 70s, since many of the countries in the global South became nominally independent or free or decolonized, they have not really achieved any significant economic prosperity that they actually aimed at, especially since the first Bandung Conference in Indonesia in 1955, where China, India, and I think more than 40 or 50 other countries of the global South said we have to basically build a group that is interested in common development and ensuring that we all sit at the table as the Charter of the United Nations has prescribed. We all must be independent. We must uphold the 5 principles of peaceful coexistence. There's not going to be any interference into the internal affairs of the others. We are all sitting in the same boat. But the system was rigged in a way that through the United States and the dominance of the dollar as the global reserve currency, and also basically the United States having the major share in international organizations like the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank, etc., and of course Europe and the United States having the most capital in the major economic and monetary formations. The system was rigged to the detriment and the disadvantage of the global South. And I think the BRICS and BRICS Plus, or BRIC, however you want to call them, you are seen as an opportunity, a chance that the global majority that has not had the chance to develop and to have an equal voice in the United Nations system is now has a lever, a leverage against the so-called global minority or whatever, the G7, to actually bring about an equitable and fair and just system. Now the question is very simple: is the United States, is Europe going to answer this positively? Will they say?
That's the question. Yeah.
Yes.
Right.
Can you hear me? I hear you.
Yeah,
I was just making the final point that the question is, will the West respond positively to this and take this as a chance to remedy, colonialism and insufficient development in the global South, or will they take it as a threat, an attack against their privileges, the hegemony. If I look in German media, unfortunately, so far there are unjustified fears spread around, and there are unjustified arguments for antagonization. And I think that's very wrong, and it will lead to more conflict, even war, and we don't want that.
Indeed, the world doesn't want the war. Hello, Steve. If everything is okay, yeah? Can you hear me from here? Steve Gill? Can you hear me, please? And indeed, just to remind our televiewers joining just now that this is Global Insider on For You Media Africa, and we are analyzing the role of BRICS in global economy and looking at how the perspectives coming into play in this new world order, which is not only politically motivated, but also looking at how new measures or principles can be brought into the world's economy to solve the economic problems existing, especially in developing countries. And that is the goal of the BRICS plus bloc in today's world. Now we continue to analyze how will the existing system view these new steps taken by other groups, emerging markets across the global world, patterning the economic development of the global world, looking at the financial system. And let me come back to you, Yulia. Having discussed all of these stakes, we want to understand if or the role of these BRICS nations, we're talking Russia, China, Brazil, India, South Africa, and other countries that recently joined the bloc. How imperative it's the countries redefining their domestic policies and even their geopolitical stance towards ensuring that there is a positive outlook on the global economy. Like Stephan said, it is imperative to curtail the number of crises that the world is already facing at the moment. What can you say regarding these BRICS nations redefining, developing domestic policies and even their geopolitical stance in order to attain this milestone in the global economy?
I'm sorry, Clarice, can you hear me now?
I can hear you. I can hear you now, Steve, of course.
Thank you. I turned everything off and turned it back on. The best technology reboot. Turn on and off.
Absolutely. But that wouldn't stop us from discussing stakes which are of vital importance in today's world. Of course, we are looking at the BRICS Plus group and the global economy. Some analysis have been advanced so far regarding these major stakes by Stephan and Yulia. And I was asking you a question of, given that, of course, there is this discrepancies between the developed world, and of course we're talking about the group of 7, and we see the new changes being brought to the world's economy by the BRICS and other international or multilateral blocs which have come out to ensure or define a new world economic order. So the question is, in your perspective, what do you think are those collective measures that the BRICS Plus group can adopt to ensure the continuity and, of course, especially in the developing countries of a global economic development?
Well, as Stephan was speaking earlier, as I was kind of cutting in and out, the infrastructure that is being built in these BRICS nations is of critical importance. I was as you know, Clarice, recently in Russia, in Moscow, and other locations, was in Turkey and Istanbul. And when you look at the airports, you look at the bridges, you look at the roads, they have spent a lot of money there and around the globe on their infrastructure, on bridges and roads and airports. And in the US, as Stephan was pointing out, we have let those decline. And it has an economic impact on us, but it also has an economic impact on the rest of the world. When you squeeze a balloon and put pressure on an economy in one place, it is going to balloon out in another location. So when the US is not operating on all cylinders, when our economy is not moving forward as it should, it hurts us, but it also sort of hurts the global economy as well. Another example is when the Biden administration decides that we will not exploit our energy resources, our oil, our natural gas. When he cuts off that pipeline of oil, literally, then it affects the oil supply, the energy supplies around the globe. Not only does it deprive Americans of wealth and prosperity, I mean, the Saudis do pretty well exploiting their energy, their gas, their oil, and making a lot of wealth. And yet we're hampering our own selves by cutting off sources of wealth here in the United States that could be deployed to build bridges, to improve roads, to build better airports, and yet we've not. And then with just the example this week of a cargo ship colliding with a bridge in Baltimore that has now blocked off one of the flow and outflow of goods and products from the United States, that's going to have a global impact. That's going to have a serious global impact. And it's going to be weeks just to clear the steel from that port to allow ships to flow in and out, much less to rebuild a bridge that was already in need of repair before. It may take 4 years to rebuild that bridge. 1 million people a month have been crossing that bridge. Where do they go? What happens to the goods? What happens to the economy in the US, in that Baltimore area when jobs are lost, and around the globe when those goods can't flow in and out of that major port? And just diverting those ships to other ports doesn't work because they're already almost at capacity because we haven't been building an airplane and the next airplanes are all full. There's no place to put me. So when these products that are on these container ships that are heading for this particular port or heading out from this port, there's no place to put them after you bump them from that flight. So I think we're going to see a serious impact globally because we are all connected globally, and enough Americans aren't paying attention to BRICS, both the threat and the opportunity that it provides to us, and we need to wake up.
It's imperative. Let me stay with you. You just mentioned the breach actually in Baltimore, there in the United States of America now, and we know that one of the key maybe role of BRICS in the global economy is to ensure infrastructure development. Stephan mentioned earlier on that the changes occurring at the global level will also determine and how the Western other countries will react to this. So now, how can the BRICS in the aspect of infrastructure development, Steve, bring countries into investing heavily in the infrastructure of the developing countries or the global world to actually curtail the series of the crises we had, like the recent accident in Baltimore Bridge?
Well, the United States, I think, has spent way too much money providing bombs and bullets and munitions. We're seeing it in Ukraine right now, where billions are being spent to destroy parts of Donetsk and Luhansk and the Donbass region, Mariupol, which I've visited in the past. And you know, the people there were telling me is providing those bombs and munitions to destroy things. The Chinese are in there building apartments, building bridges, building roads. Who's going to have more affinity with those people in 5-10 years, the U.S. or China? We're seeing the same thing in other parts of the world where the United States may be providing military aid, may even be providing humanitarian aid to third world countries in Africa and Central America and South America, but we're not there as partners building an infrastructure, building partnerships, building relationships that can move us forward. And I know, Clarice, you and I and Yulia have had conversations recently and over the last 6 months. There is going to be an after to the Ukrainian conflict. Who's talking about what happens after, both in terms of repairing relationships with Russia. It's going to be better for the world if Russia is involved rather than sort of isolated, or worse, pushed to China, pushed to India, pushed to those who may be adversaries of the U.S. and Western Europe. It's going to be better if we're working together, and there's not enough conversation of the after, or nearly enough conversation of how the U.S. can play a bigger infrastructure, business development role in India, in Africa, in these other parts of the globe where we've tended to ignore them rather than involve them as real partners.
The global south, Steve, given with everything that you've underlined, now there is need for this greater measures to promote economic cooperation and connectivity among BRICS nations and other important global economies. With all of these at stake, what practical measures do we need, or is important for the BRICS Plus group to start strategizing in this quest of redefining a new economic order? What measures are going to be so applicable in the changing times?
Well, as again, you and I and Yulia have talked recently, people-to-people connections work. Governments don't work together very well. Governments tend to be adversary. While we were in Russia, while I've traveled throughout the world, people get along pretty doggone well. And we need to build these relationships with the BRICS nations and those in these nations to understand that we are not their enemies. They are not our enemies. Again, being in Moscow the last couple of weeks, you would think that a lot of folks in Russia might have an adversarial attitude towards Americans. They may not love America right now. They may not love our government as our bombs and missiles are killing their brothers and their fathers and their uncles, but they embrace people. And I think the first step I would say, if the American government were listening to me, is quit demonizing the Russian people, quit demonizing people in other countries that may be our political, our economic adversaries, and create those bridges of people that allow you to build prosperity and wealth and communications. And, again, governments don't do a good job of that.
Yeah, creating bridges of people and connecting people together. Just to divert a bit, the Russian president recently said, of course, that Russia does not have any issues with nations, but with a collective elite who have decided to exclude the Russian people and the Russian culture, and it brings us back to what we are looking at this particular moment. Yulia, if you're there, so the question is, with all of the challenges faced by the BRICS Plus group, how do you think regional dynamics within the BRICS country can influence this broader economic cooperation, and of course that will ensure a very clear trajectory economic landscape for the global world?
When BRICS was just founded, and especially when it was still BRIC, meaning yes, when BRICS was just founded, and in those times when it was still BRIC, even before the South African Republic, the Republic of South Africa joined, it was not clear to many, I would assume, game changer. And it really is a major game changer at the global arena, which has become much clearer just only, I would say, last year. So we saw around 40 countries lining up to apply to join the BRICS, because that realization was coming in. So what BRICS does, if we just put it into, several very simple and clear points. Number one, BRICS economies are based on their actual resources, starting from mineral resources and infrastructure, going up to the quality of, I don't like that wording, but here I would have to use it, the human resources, meaning the creative potential of the people and, the population itself. So the BRICS countries represent actively growing countries, not just in terms of their real value and economy, but also in terms of their population. And this leads us to the second point, which is the BRICS countries are the ones preserving traditional values. When we talk about traditional values, we also mean the family values that have a lot to do with the demographic situation, with the types of social interactions that are based on very strategic, let's say, thinking models. Because when you talk about some kind of a priority of collective over individual, when you talk about strategic thinking, when you know that you care about your children and your grandchildren and so on, you're interested in different types of interactions, even at the everyday routine level. You're interested in building a different kind of business models. You're interested in having neighbors, and here I mean not just immediate neighbors, but neighboring countries that are doing well, that are prosperous. So you're not interested in dividing and conquering. You're not interested in just extracting resources. You're not interested in destabilizing the situation in other countries, because you understand that children and grandchildren and so on for many generations will be living in that global community. And when we look at the type of planning that China, for instance, uses, they think strategically. They think in terms of hundreds of years, right? And they build their strategic and tactical plans in relation to the grand plan that they have. That's why they talk about those huge infrastructure projects, just like the New Belt, New Road initiative and many others. Number three, that is important to mention, is that at this point, the BRICS countries offer a new paradigm of international relations that implies mutual respect, that implies open access to, trade and various kinds of deals, that implies fair competition, an open dialogue on what each of the actors is able to bring to the table, and what each of the actors is interested in receiving from others, right? Number four, that BRICS is doing, and that's why it's a major game changer, is that even though there are various political issues and issues that have conflict potential between the countries, within this framework, they're able to put them aside and discuss the constructive agenda, understanding that we all share the same planet and we all should take responsibility for our own actions and how it affects everybody else. And the last point I would like to make here, number five, in terms of how BRICS affects the current global paradigm and transformation, or I'd rather say after the transformation period, is that the current international law system that was mostly introduced by and dominated, well, the collective West, as we call it, is failing as well, because the ones who introduced it are not really following the rules of international law, or the international law that they were pushing for so many years. And so even the current ongoing conflict between shows that Russia's position was still in sticking to the Minsk agreements, sticking to the international regulations that were supposed to peacefully settle the conflict, and a lot of patience was demonstrated in terms of that, even though various reasons, starting from humanitarian operation or rescue operation or whatsoever else, could have been used in order to escalate the conflict to the military phase even earlier. But even in this framework, Russia has demonstrated of the international law and, of supremacy of agreements that were fixed and formulated and put on paper and signed. And the BRICS countries are demonstrating exactly that: consolidation and ability to put collective interests above their own, let's say, their own interests for the strategic value of peace and development. And I think that this is key, because the system, again, that was introduced by the West was discredited by the West itself.
And of course, we want to understand how these new changing paradigm or dynamics can redefine, especially international cooperation or relations. Coming to you, Stefan, with this shift in power dynamics across the global world, do you think we can have a different aspect of international cooperation with the strong BRICS plus coming in that will shift from the struggle to be in control, the struggle to have power and fame and to subjugate especially the weaker point, but of course international relations that talks of an interconnected world that respect people and of course especially respect for the sovereignty of independent nations across the globe. Can the BRICS change these perspectives?
In my humble opinion, can you hear me? Okay, in my humble opinion, I think it has already changed. The shift has already occurred towards the global majority, where the BRICS or BRICS 10 or BRICS 30 are just the face of it. An economic paradigm shift that is already taking place, or it's basically it's tilted the game board, so to speak. And the West, some in the West, I think the leaders that are still representing the wealth and the power of the elites of the West, they haven't understood this change yet. And that makes it very dangerous. I mean, in Germany, for example, we have politicians, it doesn't matter what party they represent, they are drunk. I mean, drunk in terms of they want to have our country war ready. They want to spend 100 billion. Some are saying 300 billion, and there's no end to it, to say that we must make the German economy divert assets towards the military-industrial complex. There is only a solution on the battlefield. We must punish Russia. We must make sure that Russia doesn't win. And you have this rhetoric day in and day out. And you've all witnessed the dialogue between these Air Force generals saying that we will deliver the so-called Taurus cruise missile to Ukraine. Whether our Chancellor Scholz will basically hold the line and say, no, we will not do that, because that means by Germany in the war, is not sure. And you also have Macron of France saying that he's talking about sending official French troops to Ukraine to hold the line in Odessa, etc. This is really something that is pushing us into the direction of World War III. And this will not be a conventional war because the stakes are so high, and some in the West, especially in the Anglo-American transatlantic think tanks, they're already making these speculations about how to defeat Putin by bringing in basically a nuclear chicken game. So I'm just saying this doesn't take place in the void, or takes place especially with the background of this historical shift that has already happened. I think some, haven't realized it, but some have, and they're saying there is no way that the West can actually preserve its hegemony and its privileges it has enjoyed for maybe 500 years, during the first successes of not globalization, but colonization, which is just a pre-form of it. I think the only option that some of them think they have is basically a war confrontation. This will not eliminate their enemy, it will eliminate mankind of itself. So I think the only reasonable solution is we should have leaders in the West coming to the forefront saying this is insane. Let's not risk a war with Russia, or let's not risk a regional war side of Israel against the Palestinians, or several other hotspots, especially also Taiwan, etc. But we must cooperate with this new reality. And I think this is a process that doesn't come about by itself. We have to organize for it. We have to basically build networks also in the West with people who are actually seeing this reality and seeing that there must be a change in the paradigm, not only in the BRICS, which has already happened, but also in the West, because otherwise I think we will basically lose humanity. But it's not predetermined. I think we also have an equal chance of entering maybe exactly that new paradigm of nations in the world that will develop, where young people in India and Indonesia, Malaysia, in Ethiopia, wherever they are, can actually have a future for the next 100 or 75, 100 years and become engineers and become scientists and become whatever they want. Not fearful, and I'm trying to stay optimistic.
Indeed, trying to stay optimistic. Just to add to what you said, Stephan, I think if actually I get the facts right, the European Union official Joseph Borrell recently has been warning of statements which are negative and can spiral war in especially as far as the Russian-Ukraine crisis are concerned, and he warned countries of making utterances regarding the deployment of NATO forces on the ground. And of course, he actually highlighted the fact that the West actually does not involve in the crisis in Ukraine because they love Ukrainians. It's for their geopolitical interest. And of course, this is coming to you, Steve Gill. We want to understand how the BRICS Plus coming up as a strong giant, not only economically but actually politically. How can they turn political and geopolitical narratives across the global world actually to maybe prevent this looming third world war that people are actually anticipating? How can the BRICS use its prowess in this present context? We've noticed the enormous stride that the BRICS Plus has recorded so far. Now, to be able to turn things around, especially across international corporations and even geopolitical aspects, what do you think are the right parameters for the bloc to use to influence political and geopolitical influence, where we see a world that is interconnected, where we see the respect, a mutual respect between countries, rather than fight for power and control?
Well, I think, first of all, the United States should embrace BRICS as partners, not as adversaries. They may be competitors, but they shouldn't be treated as adversaries. The same thing with China, the same thing with Russia and these other countries. As Stephan was speaking, it occurred to me, and I don't want to be too simplistic in relating history, but the United States used to lead in the world rather than bully to get our way. Occasionally we would nudge hard, but for the most part we led with what Julia was talking about, with a moral clarity, with a moral purpose, with a sense that our political system was going to be the blueprint of how others could practice elective democracy, elective leadership by the people being involved. And now you've got our administration trying to jail and prosecute lead political adversaries, jailing protesters only if they're of the opposite political party. We've got political leaders around the country saying that the United States has no position to tell people how to operate their voting processes or to run their countries when we're running ours so awry from our words and what we've talked about for 50 years. We can't tell people how to do things when we're not following our own rules, our own procedures. And I think when you lose that moral clarity, when you lose that transparency, when you lose that high ground, you lose the capacity to lead people in the right direction that you wish, rather than to bully them. We may not like in the United States, or at least our government may not like, how the people of Russia voted overwhelmingly for Vladimir Putin, but their votes should matter to us. We may not like that Maduro is in charge in Venezuela, but the people in Venezuela overwhelmingly elected him. We need to start dealing with the world, in my view, as it is, and not try to bully people into doing what we wish, not trying to overturn governments like you have President Biden trying to push Netanyahu out in Israel. Again, you may or may not disagree with where he is, but for us to interfere with foreign countries and their political process violates everything that America supposedly stands for. And right now, we're bullying India, one of the BRICS nations, into not buying Russian oil with the threat of sanctions if they purchase Russian oil. Again, that's going to drive up oil prices internationally. We're not getting our own oil and gas, so we're depriving the world of those assets, which will drive up prices and hurt people economically. This is not leadership. And if I had one thing to tell the American leadership on both sides of our political aisles, it would be stop bullying and start leading again.
And do you think there is room for change at this particular moment, dear Yulia? We are looking at how the world is actually suffering because of some sort of leadership lapses, especially at the international level. It is a global village. I want us to contextualize and bring the African continent to play. We see so many African countries expressing their interest to be part of the BRICS bloc, and of course we want to look at how these will help to redefine, especially perspective as far as the economic drive is concerned in Africa. We know that some pundits have advised, been very critical about the fact that if development, especially economic development, is being slowed in Africa, it is due to the lack of financial independence. And of course, even countries that have via local currencies, the value is still tagged to other international currencies. Where is the place of the BRICS in changing these narratives, especially in its drive towards
up until the advantage was taken of the weakened Eurasia? Let's put it that way. It was all good up until Eurasia was bleeding.
Yes. Well, some of us see
Stephan,
the perspective
you may
the
want
right
to
way.
answer this question, of course.
Are we back,
we
Brics?
didn't see you for a minute or two, Clarice.
Hello, Yulia.
Yes. Can you hear us?
Yes. Could you please repeat the question?
The question was actually the role of the BRICS in helping, especially African countries. You know, there is the drive for financial independence across the continent, and I also highlighted that when you see even countries that have their local currencies, the value is still being defined by a certain, maybe an international currency. We are looking at the BRICS drive towards de-dollarization. How can this help maybe economies in Africa, as even more and more African countries are looking forward to becoming member states of the BRICS bloc?
Well, in my opinion, what is essential for the African countries to realize at the moment is that it's not really them needing the West, but the West needing them, right? So the wealth of many Western countries, including France, including Belgium, to a certain extent the United States, but that's less of the percentage. It was built on the resources coming from Africa, on the ability to extract those resources and just take them out at the lowest rates, to use either cheap labor or even slave labor to build their economies. So the African countries, well, in some hypothetical model, they could have just claimed their sovereignty, and they could have just claimed their own value based on their own estimations. But it's clear that in the current interconnected world, it's impossible to switch to an alternative model without great losses, unless it's an evolutionary process, even if it's a fast-forwarded evolution, right? So the BRICS countries, again, play a role of a major game changer at the African continent, because they really change Africa's negotiation positions with the West. When they can clearly say that they can negotiate with China, they can negotiate with India, Russia, and Arabic countries, that makes the West lose its dominance. But in order to switch to an alternative financial model, it is necessary for most of the countries to join it in quite a fast or quite a short period of time, right? Because otherwise the entire system of international trade would just fail. So alternative payment systems were being worked on starting from at least 5-7 years ago. And from the point of view, from the technical point of view, everything is already set and ready. So what is needed right now is to define the key principles on which the new model could be implemented. And those principles have to be agreed on by all of the key actors, at least, so that others could later join. So we need at least several, big players here joining the alternative system. And for this process to go smooth, probably what would be required is the coexistence of the old and the new systems at the same, period of time, so that the transition would not be much painful and wouldn't be causing too much of damages. But coming back to the economic pressure that a lot of African countries are experiencing, including the ones that are using CFA franc that they are not even able to control, it's important to look at the current trends and at the countries that have already claimed that they refuse that system and they would be switching to an alternative one. And here again, BRICS and its work, its joint work, can serve as a very good point of reference and a very good, let's say, foundation for a different negotiation position for the African countries. So we see right now that the West again is compromising itself even in this area, because once the conversation was launched and the discussions were launched on how to make sure that the Russian assets that were being stored in Europe can be basically confiscated and given to Ukraine, the Chinese investors, the investors from Arabic countries that do hold quite a significant share of financial resources in their hands, of course, they started rethinking their trust in European and, well, generally speaking, Western institutions, because if political foundations and political reasoning, political motivation can be stronger than the legislation, than the international law, and then the economic interests, it means that their money is also not safe when they are in the hands of the Western banks or financial institutions. So I would assume that if it happens that the Russian assets are confiscated, Naturally, the Chinese and Arabic as some of the biggest investors and let's say finance holders would start withdrawing either slowly or, you know, in a fast manner. They would start withdrawing their assets as well, and that would mean a complete failure of you know, the Western banking system.
And of course, need to change the narrative. So, coming to you, Stefan, and now we are looking at the changes that can occur in, especially drastic changes occur in the global level, pertaining these decisions, especially sanctions on Russia, and which will have effect on the running of businesses or cooperation with other BRICS nations. Now, we want to look at the aspect of multilateralism and global governance. So, do you think if actually the BRICS works together with a reformed International Monetary Fund, the World Trade Organization, it can give a greater scope for this strong bloc to reshape global economic rules that will, and also institutional framework that will influence global economic governance?
Well, I agree with the position of Yulia that the BRICS countries would have to first establish a fail-safe system of their own. And there are some proposals being made. One was by the former vice president of the BRICS Bank, the new development bank, a Brazilian gentleman named Mr. Batista. Yeah. He's wrote a whole book on the BRICS financial system, but I favor actually a proposal by a Russian economist named Sergei Glaziev, who basically said the 5 original BRICS countries can start issuing or creating a trade settlement currency, which may be called R5, because all the currencies in the 5 original BRICS countries start with the letter R, like the ruble and the rand and the rupee. And but the decisive thing that Mr. Glaziev has brought in is that the Western price system for raw materials is completely rigged, because they are tied, the prices are tied to speculators in, in Chicago and Amsterdam and London, etc., where prices for raw materials and fossil fuels, etc., are fixed. And this is not a price reflective of the long-term value and stability that raw materials have to play in the industrialization of Africa, of Asia, Latin America, etc. So he proposed, which I absolutely think is a very key proposal, to create new price systems for all the raw materials that are in the possession of BRICS countries, and basically issue long-term contracts. I think this would really make a difference if you trade, it could be metals or fuel minerals or whatever industrial minerals are needed for the completion or the reconstruction of the infrastructure of the BRICS nations and the global South. You can fix prices and have long-term contracts so that there is no volatility and no control of the prices in the West, basically, or in the old system. And you brought up the International Monetary Fund and I think the World Trade Organization.
Yeah.
I think that only if and when the BRICS have established their own system of what I was saying, of raw materials prices, of trade settlement currency, of the banking communication system, of transborder financial transactions, etc. Only then can they come up with a strong position versus the IMF and the World Bank. I think that the significance of the former Bretton Woods institution will be very, very diminished. Of course, they will still play an important role, but I think that there's going to be, as we all say, a multipolar world where there are different systems and people can actually choose what system they prefer. Now, I don't think that a lot of the elites that Steve Gill talked about will actually settle for a much smaller role in the global scheme of things. But I think that's the only solution. And to go around and, as Steve rightly pointed out, to bully people who stop following the Western logic is just something that will backfire every time it is being tried. And so I think that the West, I mean, also my own country, we are internationally, of course, an import and export oriented country. Germany and Europe, they don't have the resources, the mineral resources. I mean, even Nord Stream was now bombed in 2022 without a decent investigation. We don't have the natural gas pipelines functioning anymore, and we're on the declining end of demography. I think Africa will be, according to United Nations estimates, more than 2 billion people, maybe even, approaching 3 billion people at the end of the century. And they are today young, active, imaginative, creative. So if we don't think about how to build bridges and to cooperate with the system, I think we will be, totally isolated and unfortunately step into the trash bin of history, which I don't want.
Indeed, it's about building bridges of cooperation, bridges of respect for sovereignty as the world brings another momentum to globalization. We have just few minutes to be together, but we end with you, Steve Gill. We are looking at the BRICS coming with these new perspectives in the quest for a new world order, especially economic world order. According to recent economic news, a central bank digital currency, CBC, is actually connected to the SWIFT network, is expected to launch within a few months. So the question is this a challenge for BRICS, the group that is already working towards having an alternative currency that will bring about a decline in Western financial hegemony? What do you have regarding this new development across the financial world?
I think the currency is certainly one part of it, but the other is, as both Yulia and Stefan were pointing out, we have rules. We have rules of financial transactions. And when the United States doesn't follow the rules, how can we impose those rules on everybody else? And if we want a Wild West situation where everybody does whatever they want, you're going to have more chaos rather than a system that promotes prosperity and business dealings that will be fair and transparent. As Yulia pointed out, if the West starts confiscating Russian individuals' assets, converting them to give to Ukraine, why would any country want to trust that their assets in U.S. or Western banks are going to be safe from the same thing? We're seeing that play out in New York right now, where a Democrat judge, a Democrat attorney general are pursuing Donald Trump, the lead opponent to Joe Biden, to say that he overvalued assets, even though there's no indication that any bank or insurance company lost any money. They've claimed that Mar-a-Lago, his property in Florida, is worth $18 million when everybody else acknowledges it's worth $800 million or more. If they can prosecute him, impose a $500 million fine on him with no victims, nobody hurt, and just to politically pursue him, then every other business in New York has to be saying, they can do it to me if I don't do what they want me to do. And you're already seeing businesses leave. You will see foreign businesses leave the U.S. banks, the US financial institutions, the European banks and financial institutions, if we demonstrate that the rules don't apply when it comes to taking individuals' assets because we don't like their politics, we don't like the politics of their country, and that is a beyond dangerous route for not only the US and Western Europe, but for the world.
Indeed, for the world, and the goal is to make the world safer for humanity, is to ensure that all the countries of the world benefit from the endowment. Of course, I will want to thank you, Yulia BERG, Stephan, and Steve Gill, for your great insight on a topic for discussion this day, which is a very pertinent, a new world order, a new economic world order that will see especially countries of the global south have a more concerted voice regarding decisions or especially financial decisions taken at a global level, like you underlined, Steve. If nobody is above the role, and of course it is imperative for the US and other Western countries to also align with the changing dynamics across the global world and embrace the philosophy of multipolarity, where we see, in the words of Yulia, where we see a positive competition, where we see a mutual understanding and the respect for humanity, respect for the sovereignty to make a world indeed a beautiful global village. I want to thank you all for your great insight. It's always a pleasure, and to appreciate the televiewers who have had confidence on the Pan-African television as we continue to analyze stakes not only affecting the African continent but the global world at large. Remember that the world is a global village, and it is interconnected. One entity not doing well will automatically affect stakes in another entity, and that's why we can have some sort of discrepancies and the fight for more power and control, especially at the international level. Continue to still trust the Pan-African television, as will help you to redefine narratives, especially along very important geopolitical aspects. Thank you so much, and I will be drawing the curtains into today's edition of the program Global Insight. But don't go away. Keep having a lovely moment in the company of programs on For You Media Africa. See you some other time.